Okay, it's my pleasure to have, as part of this Reflections from Pharmacy Leaders Advancing the Profession, to have with us today William Zellmer, Bill Zellmer, who is president of Pharmacy Foresight Consultant, which is a company that provides insights into strategic and professional issues in pharmacy practice and education. He is past president of the American Institute of the History of Pharmacy, and most of his career was spent on staff at the American Society of Health System Pharmacy, ASHP, including where he served as Deputy Executive Vice President and a longtime editor of the journal, American Journal of Health System Pharmacists. He's published two wonderful books, one titled The Conscience of a Pharmacy, and then Nourishing the Soul of Pharmacy. So it's my pleasure to welcome Bill with us. Thank you. All right, my first question, we'd like to learn more about your journey as you developed in your professional career. And we consider you a leader, an academic. Well, we consider you a leader in many regards, in a lot of different areas, professional organizations, policy, publishing, and we'd like to learn more about your journey. And in that, you can reflect on maybe key events or people that influence you in that journey.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, Terry. I'll rely on you to let me know if I'm not coming through clearly.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as you pointed out, I had a long career on the staff of the American Society of Health System Pharmacists, where, among other things, I served as editor of our journal, and for a number of years after that as Deputy Executive Vice President. I think I was prepared for this kind of work, including what I do now in my consulting activities with Pharmacy Foresight Consulting. I was prepared for that through my student days at the University of Wisconsin. I had some wonderful mentors there, Dr. Glenn Sonnedecker and Dr. Ernst Stieb in history of pharmacy. Dr. Dale Worster, who was sort of a pharmaceutics person, had a great capacity for letting pharmacy students know how the science of pharmacy, could be applied in practice. So all of those experiences were very influential to me. I was also involved in student activities there. I edited a student publication, and those things gave me the idea that if I could ever combine organizational work, journalism or editing, writing in a career in pharmacy, I'd find that very satisfying. And I found that at ASHP relatively early in my career. So I feel very fortunate in that regard. So I did a lot of writing when I was editor of the journal. Many of my editorials were compiled in one of the books you mentioned, The Conscience of a Pharmacist. And what I tried to do there was sort of analyze pharmacy's current situation and create a picture, create a vision for something more, something greater, something more patient-oriented perhaps. At the time when I started at ASHP, I think it's safe to say that hospital pharmacy practice was still primarily a logistical activity, drug distribution, that type of thing. And I was fortunate to have some opportunities to work with ASHP and other organizations to begin creating a different vision for pharmacy practice in hospitals, where it would be hospitals and health systems, where it would be more of a patient care or clinical function, and a lot of my writing focused on that type of thing. In my consulting work now for the past 10 years or so, I started the Pharmacy Forecast Report, which is published annually by ASHP, which is an effort to stimulate strategic planning by hospital pharmacy directors, looking at some of the external influences that are impacting our profession, that will certainly impact pharmacy practice in hospitals and health systems, and helping those practice leaders understand those external trends and make changes in their own practice that will help them succeed in a new environment that is certainly unfolding. So I hope that gives you a bit of a flavor, perhaps, for some things that have been elements of my journey and that influenced me early on in my journey as a pharmacist.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that, Bill. Um, so the next question has to do with your legacy. Uh, and we'll say in 20 years. What do you believe will be your legacy in 20 years? And often I rephrase this question to say, what are you most proud of in terms of your contributions to help advance the pharmacy profession?
Yeah, I think the latter part of your question is probably what I would like to focus on. I think there are a number of things that I've been able to contribute that I feel good about, that I think have helped advance our profession. And in terms of what my legacy will be like in 20 years, who knows? It's not for me to say. um, but at my work at ASHP, I think to repeat things that I've said before or alluded to before, I had a role in helping pharmacists rethink their mission, particularly in the institutional environment. Is it simply drug distribution, or is there something more dealing with appropriate use of medicines, responsible use of medicines? And what can the pharmacist do to sort of transition into that role? So I feel good about the things that I was able to achieve in that regard, building consensus among many pharmacists that indeed we need to move in that direction. I did a lot of work at ASHP in terms of what I would call organizational effectiveness, where through strategic planning and again, consensus building, I think we did some good thinking about the most appropriate things that an organization like ASHP can do to help advance practice. I'm sure you know the PTCB, the Pharmacy Technician Certification Board. I, with representatives from 3 other organizations, were quite instrumental in establishing the Pharmacy Technician Certification Board. And I think that is certainly something that I feel very, very good about. And I think what I'm doing currently, or have done in the recent past at least, with the Pharmacy Forecast Report, stimulating pharmacy practice leaders to engage in strategic planning and to look beyond immediate operational issues into the external environment and the many things that are influencing there, and trying to plan for those. So those are a few things I would mention for you, Terry.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And I'm glad you mentioned the PTCB board, because that's part of our history as we look forward to the evolution of the role of technicians in practice.
Yep.
So my next question has to do with advice for students in their professional journey, especially how they can develop as a leader. And when I refer to leaders, often the little L, it could be the big L, but I suspect you have lots of advice for students, and you probably have given students advice over the years. So I'd like to hear some of that.
Sure. Well, I would put at the top of my list, Terry, recognizing the value of history, learning the history, knowing the history of our profession, knowing the things we've tried to do in the past to advance the profession, things that have worked, things that didn't work, and taking lessons from that. You mentioned that I was recently president of the American Institute of the History of Pharmacy. I think that's a wonderful organization. I first joined as a student more than 50 years ago now, and student membership in that organization is welcomed and encouraged. I know you focus on history in your academic work, and I think that's to be commended. But I think to be a leader in our profession, one really needs a good grounding in our history and how we evolved, how we developed. Another piece of advice I would have for students is don't take for granted the progress that we've made in our development of the pharmacy profession. There are all kinds of influences in the external environment that could, rather than make our future bright, which I think it is, could make it bleak. So again, we have to continually work on not only maintaining the status of the profession, but advancing it and figuring out, learning from history, ways in which we can advance it. And then my final bit of advice, be mindful of the ethical imperative in pharmacy practice. That's really key to being a professional person. there are all kinds of imperatives that face us in practice, including the technical imperative. You know, pharmacists have a lot of technical knowledge about the appropriate use of drugs, and we certainly want to apply that. There's also the financial imperative, which seems to be driving things more and more, but the ethical imperative, what it means deep down inside of us as pharmacists to be a health professional. Finding a way then, as you get into practice, learning to balance those perspectives and not be driven completely by the financial imperative, not be driven completely by the technical imperative, but factoring in the ethical, the professional imperative as well.
Mhm. Those are great words. Thank you for those comments. I appreciate that. So my last question has to do with since this is a history course, and these videos will be shared with people outside of the course as well. But one of the things, as we study the decade of the 2020s, one of the key events in this decade will be the COVID-19 pandemic. It definitely will be an event in this decade, and I believe it will also be an opportunity or a turning point like other events in history. And maybe share some comment how you see this being as a milestone or a key event opportunity for the profession.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, Terry. It could well be an opportunity for pharmacists as we, get past this and look back at this particular era. How did pharmacists react? How did they behave? How did they contribute to caring for people afflicted with COVID-19? I think it could be an opportunity in terms of maybe expanded responsibilities for pharmacists that they're given. Where they're needed and where they demonstrate that they have the ability to perform, opportunity to demonstrate leadership, maybe on a broader stage than just pharmacy practice. So this could well be an opportunity for, again, stepping up a notch or two in terms of the role that pharmacists are playing in healthcare. It's, of course, much too early to make any predictions, but I think the opportunity is there. And I have already seen many practitioners sort of recognize this opportunity and step up and capitalize on it and move forward, move our profession forward in the process.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for those kind remarks. I appreciate that. Again, it's always my pleasure to chat with you, Bill. And thank you again for your time.
You're quite welcome. I appreciate the opportunity speaking with you, Terry.